Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to do some gelli printing on some unusual surfaces, and the surfaces I'm going to use are from our sponsor Paper Mart. You can find them online at www.papermart.com. And I was digging through my stash and I found some cool craft paper, kind of Chinese favor takeout boxes. I found some canvas bags and some cool jewelry boxes, which are great for giving jewelry, but also this size here, I think it's the DVD size, is actually perfect for doing like note card sets. And I love giving note card sets as gifts because it's just a really fun thing, and everyone always needs greeting cards, birthday cards, and stuff like that. So I'm going to do some of these, and sometimes it's hard to print on unusual surfaces, so I have another little trick we're going to print on. We're going to print on some of this jewelry tissue, and it's really kind of crinkly and crispy and just really great for printmaking. So we're going to do on some of this too, and then we can make decorative tapes from this, or just use it to fill in areas that didn't get printed well from our gelli printing experience. And if you don't have a gelli printing plate, don't worry, you can make your own gelatin plate. You can use whatever brand you have. It doesn't really matter. And you can always use the techniques you learn to enhance whatever artwork you plan on doing. So without further ado, I'm going to put on a sweater because I've got some crazy long sleeves happening and they're going to like dip into my paint and I'm going to be a nightmare. So I'm going to put a sweater on, we're going to go to the table, and we're going to start printing. Woo! Here I'm starting off with a clean gelli plate, and I have all of my paints, brayer, and tools aligned on my work surface so I can reach it easily. I've put down some white paint because I know I'm painting on surfaces that are not white and I want to have that opacity in my paint. And then I've added some blue and teal just to have a couple colors that aren't going to make mud when mixed. And I brayered over it to create an interesting pattern. Now I'm putting down a paper stencil, and I'm going in first with my jewelry tissue just so that I can pull off some of the pattern there. And I'll be using that tissue later, so make sure you don't throw that away. It's a really great way to make some kind of filler pattern for adhering on to your artwork later. And then I've just done the stencil again so that I can make that print elsewhere. Now I'm pressing my box in there, and see, this is the lid to one of the craft jewelry boxes, and I can put my hand right inside the lid and give it a good push. And there I get some really interesting texture, and I can also hit the edges on the rest of the leftover paint on my plate to get a nice base color. This really isn't going to be that sensational looking on its own. It's more just to kind of lay down some opacity and some interesting marks and textures for my pieces. And here I found this pretty quatrefoil stencil, and I'm doing that on another piece of the deli paper. Well, it's actually jeweler's tissue, but you could use deli paper as well. And then I'm pressing that onto the takeout box. Now, if it felt like you weren't getting a really good impression, you could open up the takeout box and put your hands inside to really make sure you push it against really well. Now, I had a problem with that magenta paint. That's a heavy body paint by Liquitex, and it didn't want to spread out. So you'll see when I go and do some prints on that I'm actually going to end up with some pretty big spots of that magenta paint, which actually I think looks kind of cool, but it's just to kind of, I just want to let you know, so if you have a paint that's much heavy bodied than another one, you might want to brayer that out first and then add your other colors. I thought this would be great on the canvas bag though, because it's such a strong color, and I thought it would really, with that bold stencil, really give me a nice look on the bag, which I think it did. And again, jewelry tissue to pull off the extra, and there you can see that cool medallion. And then when I remove the stencil, I've got the cool negative image that I can use on a box lid, and that looked really, really cool after I pressed that out. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. The thing to remember is that when you're doing unusual objects, you want to make sure that you're really making contact. But since I got too much of a big splot there on that box, I used my brayer just to even it right out on the surface. So, you know, don't be afraid to do that. Don't think that, well, I put my print down, now that's it, that's all there is to it. You can totally go in, paint over it if you need to, print over it until you get the desired effect. In fact, I'm rarely ever satisfied with my prints under just one layer. I like to keep going over it until I get some cool effects. Now that was a really great effect that I really enjoyed. Now remember what I said about that magenta being thick? So I decided to put that down on its own and brayer that out first before adding additional colors. That made it a lot easier to have it mix and mingle with the other paints. In this case, I'm using kind of like a cobalt blue and some white to create my base for this next print. I chose a striped stencil because it's super bold, and when you're printing on fabric, especially like a canvas like this here, you'll want a bolder stencil because a really fine detailed stencil is not going to show up very well. And again, I'm grabbing some of my leftover deli paper, or tissue paper rather, and I am picking up the extra prints there, and you can see it is starting to build a really interesting pattern on my jewelry tissue. And then I've just got a cool stripe on the back side of that gift bag. Now, because I have a lot of paint left over, I want to try this on another bag to see what happens. And it did give me an interesting print, but it's really not as bold as I'd like. So I think when I go on fabric, I want to make sure it's a first generation print and not a second generation print. Another thing I like to do is use foam stamps to both stamp on the plate and to also stamp off onto other objects. And then I press the box bottom into this plate to pull up that really cool texture. And while I'm at it, I'm going to get all of the edges of the box to give that really cool texture, pattern, and color to all sides of the box. I think it's a really great effect. And then you're not wasting anything from the stamp or from the plate. And then I can clean up any leftover paint and texture from my jelly plate onto the jewelry tissue. Waste not, want not. One thing I really want to stress here that I see a lot of people not doing, and I think that's why they're unhappy with their gelatin printmaking, is that they don't overprint. So here I'm putting this pretty star stencil on top of my on top of some yellow brayer paint, and then I'm pushing my box with the purple right over that. So I'm getting a really cool kind of starry night impression here. How pretty would that be with like a pair of crocheted baby booties in it for a gift for a newborn? That would just be wonderful. So don't be afraid to keep layering up until you're happy with your results. And you can set your stencil away to dry, or you can do this, just press your objects to the stencil, pick up paint that way, again a way to reuse it. Don't forget to go over with your jewelry tissue and pick up some more texture that way. And that's pretty much it. Just keep repeating that until you're happy with what you've come up with, and then I'll show you how to use the jewelry tissue to further embellish these found objects. Also, I wanted to mention it's really important you clean your jelly plate after you're done printmaking before you start this step. So I made myself a bit of a stamp pad by using a piece of styrofoam packaging and some acrylic paint. I just brushed the acrylic paint on the piece of, the soft styrofoam packaging that things come in. I used that for my stamping pad, and it worked great with just plain black acrylic paint. Now I'm using some roller stamps. These are from Stampin' Up! And Rollograph, and I'm just rolling on some of these very graphic, geometric, bold designs. You could use any sort of rubber stamp for this. Again, since we're using acrylic paint, make sure that you wash your stamps really well with like warm water and a toothbrush when you're done, so that the paint doesn't get dried in the nooks and crannies of your stamp and ruin it. So you want to put some black texture on here. I like to wait to use black until the end. The key, I think, to getting really beautiful jelly prints is to limit your colors when you're doing the printmaking, and then accent with black afterwards. And now I want to take a look at all of my paper objects and kind of see what ones need a little help. Like the takeout boxes didn't print as well as the jewelry boxes because they have a little more texture to them. So I'm going to go ahead and tear my jewelry tissue into strips and shapes that I can adhere onto my boxes with a glue stick. Since the jeweler's tissue is really light, the glue stick does a very adequate job of adhering it. I like to make sure that I get the edges glued really well though, so that it really holds down and doesn't peel up and get kind of sloppy looking. You could put a piece of wax paper down or a craft mat so you can really get up to the edges and go over the edges with the glue and not have a sticky work surface. But you can see how that adds such a nice bit of texture and interest and pattern to your designs. So you don't have to feel like you have to get it perfect on the first try when you're jelly printing, which I think is really important, because when I've talked to my friends that have jelly printed, they've said that, I love doing it, I love watching people do it, but when I actually do it, I'm not happy with my results. And it's just a matter of getting the layers done so that you build that interest. And it's going to look awful before it looks good. Just like any mixed media art, it seems like you get this point where you're just about to toss it in the trash. If you go a little bit further, that's when the magic happens. And on the jewelry boxes, don't be afraid to wrap the excess paper around to the middle, because when you put the fluff in there, if you're going to do jewelry, it's going to cover up those raw edges. Or you could always put just a piece of trimmed out pattern paper in there to neaten it up if you want to. That'll make sure it doesn't catch on anything and is nice and smooth. Now let's take a look at the finished products. Aren't they cute? Oh my gosh, I would love to give or receive a gift in one of these packages. The canvas bag looks really fun and funky, and I love the bohemian style on the boxes, both of the takeout boxes and the cute little craft jewelry boxes. That tissue paper was so wonderful to print on, and it really gave a fantastic result and helped us fill in any problems that might arise when we were printmaking. If you want to find any of these surfaces I use, check out our sponsor Paper Mart. You can find them online at www.papermart.com. Packaging for less. Happy crafting!